Okay, let's just get right to it. I think you saw today the President announced and authorized another presidential drawdown of security assistance valued at up to an additional $800 million, tailored to meet urgent Ukrainian needs for today's fight as Russian forces shift the focus of their ruthless aggression now to eastern Ukraine. This authorization is the 7th such drawdown of equipment from DoD inventories for Ukraine since August of 2021, and you can see the list of capabilities there up on the screen, so I won't bother reading them all to you. Some of them are reinforcing capabilities that we have already been providing Ukraine, and some of them are new capabilities that we have not provided to Ukraine. All of them are designed to help Ukraine, as we talked about, help Ukraine in the fight that they are in right now, and the fight that they will be in coming days and weeks in the eastern part of the country. The United States has now committed more than $3.2 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration, including approximately $2.6 billion since the beginning of their unprovoked invasion on February 24th. The United States also continues to work with its allies and partners to identify and provide Ukraine with additional capabilities that aren't in our stocks, that we aren't as able to get to them directly. And we're going to obviously continue to utilize all the available tools at our disposal to support Ukraine's armed forces in the face of Russian aggression. So with that, we'll go to questions. Bob.
Thank you, John. I'm wondering if you could, on the helicopters, are these the helicopters that you had on stock because they were going to Afghanistan?
Yeah, so these 11 Mi-17s are, these had been earmarked for Afghanistan. They are coming out of our stocks, our inventory. We have them. We did obviously transfer them to Afghanistan, so we're now transferring them to Ukraine. I would remind that, as you probably remember, we had already provided Ukraine 5 Mi-17s not long ago. So this is not the first time that we've given them Mi-17s.
Okay. A related question. You mentioned the urgency of this and the shift of the Russian focus to the east. Are you also putting an urgency on trying to facilitate in some way transfer of armor from Eastern European NATO member countries who would have tanks or other armor that the Ukrainians would be familiar with? Is that moving forward? Or?
Yeah, I would, without talking about other sovereign states and what they're providing, I can tell you that that there are at least a couple that are providing armor capabilities, tanks, largely T-72 tanks, which the Ukrainians know how to use, are trained on, and they are getting some transfers of tanks from other countries in NATO. But I'd leave it to those nations to speak to that more specifically.
Is there a timetable for the delivery of this?
As soon as possible. I mean, we, as you've seen us go in the past, from the time the president authorizes drawdown until the first shipments actually start landing in the region, can be as little as 4 to 5 days, and then another couple of days once they're there to get processed and actually in the hands of Ukrainian frontline forces. So we are still finishing up the last $800 million that President Biden authorized, and we're getting close to the end of that. We expect to be complete with that last $800 million by the middle of this month, around the 15th. But we're not going to wait. We're going to start getting these articles on the way as well. So I mean, we will literally start right away.
One last quick thing. On the howitzers, is this the first time you've provided artillery?
It is. It's the first time that we've provided these 155 howitzers and the associated rounds that'll go with them. And again, that's reflective of the kind of fighting that the Ukrainians are expecting to be faced with here in this little bit more confined geographic area. They specifically asked for fire support and specifically asked for artillery support.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sylvie.
Are the atrocities attributed to the Russian military, are they a factor in the decision to send Ukraine more lethal weapons?
We've been providing some lethal weapons in the past, Sylvia. This drawdown here today is a function, very specifically a function, of conversations that we have had with Ukrainian leaders in just the last few days, including the president's conversation today with President Zelensky. I mean, we tailored this list specifically to meet the needs that they have asked for with respect to what's going on in eastern Ukraine. That's what's really driving this. Travis?
Yeah, we heard a senior defense official say earlier today that U.S. troops in Europe may be tapped to help train Ukrainians on weapons systems. And I'm wondering, since we've seen this announcement of this additional security assistance, or whether there's any more clarity of whether troops will actually be doing that training, which troops may be doing the training, and if there are any particular items on that list that service members may be able to help with.
So we do anticipate that some of these items will require some additional training for Ukrainians. We haven't. We're still working through what those options are going to look like, what that training is going to look like, how many U.S. troops are going to be involved in it, where is it going to be, how long. It's going to depend. We're still working our way through that. But we believe that we can put together appropriate training for some of these systems very, very quickly. These are not highly complex systems. The systems that will probably require some additional training for Ukrainian forces are the howitzers. The TPQ-36 counter-artillery radar, not a very difficult system to operate, but it's not one that they have in their inventory. Thank you for that. Go to the MQ-64, MPQ, sorry. The Sentinel air surveillance. This is an air defense radar system, a 3D phase array, and that also is going to require a little bit of training on for that. Go back to the main list if you could. So we already talked about Switchblade training. That has already occurred, and we know that there'll probably be a need for some follow-on Switchblade training for, again, training more trainers, if you will. They might need some training on down at the bottom there, the optics and laser rangefinders, but that won't take very long. It's not a very those aren't complicated systems, but they might need some of that, and perhaps some basic training on the claymores. But the big ticket items that will require some training are those radars and the artillery systems. Again, we're still working our way through what that's going to look like, where, when, how many. It's more likely than not that what we would do, because they are in an active fight, is a train the trainers program. So pull a small number of Ukrainian forces out so that they can get trained on these systems and then send them back in. It won't be a cafeteria style. It'll likely be tailored. We'll pull troops out that, for instance, artillerymen, to learn the howitzer and then go back in and train their colleagues, rather than take an artilleryman and make them responsible for, training everybody on all these systems. So we'll do it in a tailored fashion. But again, we're working our way through that right now.
If I could just follow up, since the beginning of the conflict, there's been concerns about escalation and U.S. involvement. And I'm wondering if this U.S. training, if there are any concerns of whether this is going to look like some type of escalation or be interpreted that way by the Russians.
I can't speak for the Russian side of this. Let's go back to basics. Ukraine was invaded in an unprovoked way by Russia. They have suffered a lot of casualties, damage to so many cities. Millions of Ukrainians have now become refugees inside and outside their country. This was a war they didn't deserve. It's not a war that they certainly didn't ask for. There was no reason for Russia to invade Ukraine at all, particularly when Mr. Putin had diplomatic options on the table. We committed from the very beginning, even before the invasion, to helping Ukraine be able to defend itself. This is of a piece of that. And this is representative of the kinds of capabilities that the Ukrainians themselves have asked for and said they need as this fighting now gets focused on the eastern part of the country. How that gets interpreted by the Russians, you can ask Mr. Putin and the Kremlin. What we're concerned about is making sure that we are doing what we said we were going to do, which is have an iterative conversation with the Ukrainians and try to do the best we can to meet their self-defense needs. And again, I want to stress, this is coming from U.S. stocks, from what we've got. Other nations are doing the same thing. They're having conversations with Ukrainian leaders, and they're trying to fill their needs as best they can, too, because they have some systems that the Ukrainians are simply more comfortable with than we do. Carla.
Thank you. 3 quick ones, if I may. First of all, you say on that list there's chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protective equipment. Can you elaborate on what
Yeah,
that's
this is
gonna be?
individual equipment, protective suits, and individual detection devices.
Okay, thank you. And then Pentagon leaders either are meeting or have met today with defense contractors about Ukraine. Can you give us any more details about the meeting, who attended or is attending, what's been discussed?
Yeah, this was, as I said earlier, I mean, this meeting was of a piece of a larger, longer effort that we have put in place now over the last many months to have a recurring dialogue with CEOs of major defense contractors. A few weeks ago, a couple months ago, we talked about one that was focused on hypersonics, for instance. This one was really focused on the kinds of systems and weapons that have been relevant in the Ukraine war. And we wanted to make sure that we had a good, honest, candid discussion with these CEOs about the systems that they're producing, about the rate at which they're being produced, about the possibility for accelerating some of those production lines and expanding them based on the heavy draw on our inventory to support Ukraine. Now, I want to stress that we have not reached a level of inventory of any of these systems that are impacting our readiness abilities. But we don't want to get to that point before we start to have a conversation with industry about replenishment and the production line going forward. And so that's what this was all about. It was part of a normal, scheduled, routine conversation that we have with defense industry leaders, but obviously focused much more specifically on what's going on in Ukraine. So Boeing was represented, L3 Harris was represented, Raytheon, BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, Huntington Ingalls, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman were all represented today. Okay, and it was a good discussion. We were very grateful. I want to say that right at the top. Very grateful for their willingness to come on in and have this discussion. The Deputy Secretary Hicks kicked it off. She led it, and again, I would fully expect that there'll be additional such roundtable discussions going forward with these CEOs and perhaps others as time goes on.
Okay, thank you. And then one more, if I may. Can you confirm the reporting that's out there that the Biden administration is moving to significantly expand intel sharing with Ukrainian forces that could potentially help them take back
I've talked about this
territory?
before, Carla. We as the fight has changed, as the geographic concentration has changed for Russia, and they're focusing more on the Donbass. You heard the Secretary talked about this in testimony, that we felt it was important that we needed to update the guidance on intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians based on developments on the ground, and we're doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask about the helicopters? How are they actually getting into Ukraine? Is it Ukrainian pilots basically go pick them up, then fly them in there, or?
Yeah, we're still working. I mean, they'll be shipped over into the region, and then I don't know whether they'll be trucked in or I don't have the specific data on exactly how each helicopter is going to get inside Ukraine.
But it wouldn't be U.S. pilots at all?
No,
Okay.
no U.S. pilots flying the helicopters in Ukraine. No.
And also on the nuclear protective equipment, following up the question, was that a response to anything specific that we've seen that Russia would consider to do in Ukraine when it comes to?
We believe, actually, the Ukrainians believe it's the prudent thing to do. We've talked about this. We have talked about indications we've had in the past, weeks ago, that the Russians might resort to the use of chemical or biological weapons, and so based on talking with the Ukrainians about protective gear, and again, keeping in mind that we're We're looking at operations in a much more confined space now. The Ukrainians asked for this, and we have it, so we're going to provide it. Is it based on a specific credible threat of a use in a neighborhood or a particular area? No. But it's certainly based on long-standing concerns we've had about the potential for the Russians to use these kinds of weapons. And again, everything on this list was a result of a conversation with the Ukrainians themselves about what they needed. I can't stress that enough. We're not foisting stuff upon them because, we just think it's a good idea. This is all stuff that we've talked about with the Ukrainians. Yeah.
The howitzers.
Who are you?
I'm Mike Stone. I'm from Reuters.
Okay.
The howitzers, are those M777s from the Marines? And how did number 18 get arrived at? And should we look at additional tranches?
I mean, I don't have anything to speak to with additional tranches. I mean, this one's just now getting announced. I'm not going to rule out the possibility of additional howitzers. I don't have the exact variant available for you, but they're artillery pieces, as you know, very capable ones. And again, the Ukrainians have made it clear that in this fight that's coming, artillery is a critical need, not just the artillery piece itself, but the rounds that go with it. And you can see there's 40,000 rounds that are going on with this. And we will be in an iterative conversation with them going forward. And if they need additional artillery rounds, clearly the United States will do what we can to fill those needs. Yeah, in the back there.
Joe Gould from Defense News.
Yeah.
Hey, also on the artillery, we've seen Russian forces using standoff range missiles and artillery against the Ukrainians. Is this a bid to help even the odds by providing Ukraine with a similar capability?
It's very much an effort to give the Ukrainians every possible advantage in this fight that's coming.
And then second, something interesting on that list, there's an unmanned coastal defense vessel. Can you provide us with a little bit more detail about what that is and
this is
how it will be used?
Yeah, this is it's an unmanned surface vessel that can be used for a variety of purposes in coastal defense. I think I'll just leave it at that.
And it's from Navy's. It's a drawdown from Navy
It's coming
stock.
from Navy stocks, yeah. But it can be used for a variety of coastal defense missions. Barb?
You've mentioned several times the fight that's coming. Can you help people better understand, when you look at that list, when you look at the specific threat of the type of combat in the Donbass, what is that combat going to be that leads you to this list? How does this list address your assessment of what the combat will be in the Donbass?
Well, the first factor is the Ukrainians themselves, who have asked for these kinds of capabilities based on what they believe they're facing. They will be facing Russian forces that are familiar with the territory in that part of Ukraine. They've been fighting over it for 8 years. Will likely be replenished and restocked themselves now that they have left the northern part of the country and they are now in Belarus and or Russia, refitting, resupplying. So potentially reinforced Russian force there. So you're looking at even more Russian troops applied to the Donbass region than they have right now, and they will be resupplied. You're looking at short supply route lines for the Russians because the Donbass region borders right up alongside Russia. So part of the problem that they had, in the north was long and unsustainable lines of communication. That won't be the same problem for them. The other aspect of this is the topography, and it's been described to me that part of Ukraine as a bit like Kansas. So it's a little bit flatter, it's a little bit more open, and it's the kind of place where we can anticipate that the Russians will want to use tanks and long-range fires, artillery and rocket fire to achieve some of their objectives before committing ground troops. And so these capabilities, again, all done in concert with what the Ukrainians say they need for that particular kind of fighting.
And can I follow up on a couple other quick things? I don't think we've asked in several days. Is the Secretary and the Chairman, have they again or still tried to reach their counterparts? And has there been any success on that? And is that communications phone line still being even answered by the Russians?
As far as I know, the deconfliction line is still operational. We do check it every day. I haven't heard any reports to the contrary, that there have been no checks and there have been any problems with it. I also haven't heard any indications that we've had to use it to transmit any content, if you will. I have no conversations with Minister Shoigu to read out today. I don't know when the last attempt was, but it wasn't long ago. I think less than a week or so ago. And again, there was no interest by the Russians. I can't speak for Chairman Milley, and I don't think he's had any conversations, but I'd refer you to the Joint Staff on that.
Just very quickly, can you tell us your latest assessment of Russian military morale, both the troops on the ground and officers? What is your assessment of their morale as they go into this latest round?
Well, look, Barb, I want to be mindful of the fact that we aren't on the ground with Russian forces. We don't have perfect knowledge of unit cohesion at a tactical level inside the Russian armed forces. So speaking about something as broad as morale can be a difficult thing to do when it's not your army you're talking about. I would just say, anecdotally, we continue to see indications that there are unit cohesion problems, that many units are suffering from low morale and disenchantment by some of their younger enlisted troops, and that their leaders are also frustrated, not only with some of their troops and their troops' performance, but even with their colleagues' performance. Megan.
On the training piece of this, would some of that take place in Poland, Romania, or other countries? And can you do it with the troops who are already on the ground, or are there considerations to send more troops over to Europe?
As for locations, we haven't made that decision yet. It most likely is going to be multiple locations. I don't see this happening at just one place. I think our goal would be to achieve this with troops, our troops that are already there. Yeah. Tony.
A couple weapons questions. Are the artillery, are those all towed or already going to be self-propelled?
They're towed.
They're all towed? Okay. The President in his message today alluded to the transfer of additional helicopters. What were the prior helicopters? I might have missed that.
We talked about this at the very first question of the briefing.
No, I understand that, but he implied there were additional helicopters before this.
Those are the additional helicopters.
What were the ones? Okay, so
there were 5 Mi-17s
okay.
transferred to Ukraine earlier this year, and now another 11.
Perfect. One finally, on the 40,000 rounds, can you double check to see if any of those are those GPS guided Excalibur rounds? Those are very precision weapons that the Army uses.
Yeah, look, I'll take the question, but I don't know that I'm going to have a specific answer for you. 40,000 rounds to go with these 18 howitzers, and if we need to send more, we'll send more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else in the room? Okay, Jeff Shogel.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry if this has already been asked, but we had seen some reports yesterday that the Mi-17s would not be included in this package, and now they are. Can you explain where things stand?
I cannot explain reporting based on leaked documents. All I can do is talk to you about what the President authorized today. The President authorized 11 Mi-17s today. Let's see, Tara Kopp.
Thank you. I wanted to get back to the helicopters. Sending aircraft to Afghanistan by this administration had previously kind of been seen as a stopping point, it seemed, for its escalatory potential. But you mentioned that there were 5 that were sent previously. Were they sent before Russia instigated this invasion? And then if you could talk a little bit more about it seems like now, because of Russia's brutality in Ukraine, there's less of a concern about what Russia might find as escalatory anymore.
I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to challenge the premise of the question. It's not about, it's not that we aren't still concerned about escalation management. That's the responsible thing to do, and every decision we're making, and I've said this before, every decision we're making is we balance the needs of Ukraine to defend itself with our responsibilities, our absolute responsibilities to think about escalation management. And if we weren't you should challenge us on that. But these decisions are all done prudently. I don't know the exact date the previous 5 helicopters were transferred. I'll see if we can find that. But these are all items that the Ukrainians have said that they could use and need, and that we can get them readily. And so we're focused on doing that. Mike Brest.
Asked and answered. Thank
Heather from USNI.
Hi, thank you so much. A couple questions. First, I was wondering if you have any comments on the reports that Russian troops are taking merchants from their ships, and saying that the Ukrainians are the ones removing them. And then I wondered if you had any comments on the fact that India and the United States talked about using Indian shipyards to help repair American ships today.
Sorry, Heather, I don't have anything on your first question, and I'll take your second question and see if I can get back to you. Jared from Al Monitor.
Hi, Mr. Kirby. The Fifth Fleet Commander, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, said earlier today that I'm sorry to detract from the main focus here. The combined maritime force would stand up a new joint task force in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Will this unit be tasked with interdicting arms shipments from Iran's IRGC to Yemen's Houthis? And then I have a follow-up.
To the Fifth Fleet and to the Navy to speak to that one, Jared.
Thanks. And then just wondering if you can confirm, The Guardian reported earlier this week that Iran-backed militias in Iraq have helped smuggle RPGs and other arms to Russia via Iran, including possibly the Iranians authorizing the sending of an Iranian-made air defense system. Do you have any comment or any confirmation on that? Thanks.
From that either, Jared. I'll have to see if we have anything on that. I mean, obviously, we've seen Iran's support for proxy groups and terrorist groups throughout the region, but I can't give you anything on that. Louis, did you have one?
Yeah, a couple of questions. We've talked about this phone conversation from last week with Jake Sullivan, the Zelensky team, and General Milley. How much of this was part of requested by the Ukrainians, like full on by the Ukrainians? Was there more that they wanted that they didn't get in this, that maybe you redirected to other countries, for example, like the UK, which has provided coastal defense system, missile systems, as opposed to something that's not a...
Yeah, I don't have a readout of that call. I'd refer you to the NSC to speak to that. I can tell you that Secretary Austin speaks very frequently with Minister Reznikov. You saw that the president spoke with President Zelensky again just today. This list comes right out of those conversations. As I said earlier, the Ukrainians have asked for other systems and capabilities that we simply don't have, and that we are working with allies and partners to help them get those kinds of systems into Ukraine. But those nation states have to speak for themselves. I'll let the Ukrainians speak for whatever specifics they had on their shopping list. I'm not going to do that for them, and I'm certainly not going to talk for other countries that are also providing systems that they have and that are available to them. What I can tell you, again, two things. One, this list came directly out of a conversation, multiple conversations with the Ukrainians in the last few days as we began to see the Russians now start to reprioritize the Donbass fight. And two, we're going to have those conversations going forward. We'll iterate this, and there may be additional drawdown that's authorized. There may be additional shipments of other kinds of systems. And then I guess number three, the Secretary has been tireless in personally working with allies and partners to help them also flesh out some of those needs for capabilities we don't have. For instance, the S-300 that the Slovakian government announced that they were going to send. I mean, that was a result of obviously a lot of great work in Slovakia, but also from the Secretary's personal diplomatic efforts to work that closly.
We've also heard from officials about the significant ramp up and how quickly the previous materials have been getting into the Ukrainians, and the great logistical effort that's been undertaken to make that happen. Some of this is a much heavier lift, literally, because some of these, I mean, when you move an entire division, let's say, worth of armored personnel carriers, you usually have to do that via ship. which can take a longer time than airlift. I mean, are we going to see that similar op-tempo that you've seen for these smaller weapon systems for something like this?
The short answer is yes, Louis. I mean, look, I can't tell you as we talk at 3:15 here on Wednesday afternoon exactly when the first plane with the first items on this list are going to lift off and where that's going to come from. Not all of it has to necessarily come from the United States. But I will tell you that the Secretary is committed to moving this material as quickly as possible. And again, let's go back to the first $800 million, not the first, but the last time that the President authorized an amount of this, the $800 million. I mean, that's closing out here in just a few days. It's incredible. And I can tell you that the Secretary has made it clear to the Department that he wants that same sense of urgency to apply to this as well. So I can't give you a system right now, I'm sorry, detail right now about the shipment schedule, but as we can, I certainly will. All right? Yeah, motion.
The senior defense official recently said that Russia still has between 80 to 85% of its combat power available to them. I was just wondering if you had an update to that number.
I'd be careful here at the podium detailing issues of intelligence like that on Russian combat power. I will tell you this, though, that they still have a significant amount of combat power and combat capabilities available to them. As we talked about earlier, they have moved forces out of the north. They're going to refit, resupply those forces, and we believe, in fact, we've already seen that they're pushing some of those forces back into Ukraine just to the north of the Donbass. And we would expect that reinforcement to continue. But again, enumerating that would probably not be something I'd want to do from the podium. Yeah.
John, can you get a fact sheet for us on this unmanned combat vessel? There's none in the Navy inventory. They're all experimental. How do we know the damn thing even works? But I'm not asking you now for details, but
I'm not gonna promise you a fact sheet. I can promise you the damn thing works.
You can, huh?
Yes, I can.
I hope so.
I
But
can.
you should get a fact sheet on it because it's a new weapon.
I appreciate your interest in national security. I can assure you it works. Yes, Gordon.
You've emphasized that there's a list of asks from the Ukrainian government. But, to Louis' question, there are other things they would like to have that the U.S. does have in its inventory, other kinds of jet fighters or whatever. And so is it more accurate to...
They haven't asked for, you mean jet fighters that are in our inventory?
Yeah, I think that they would like more jet fighters that that are in the U.S. inventory, or at least have hinted at that, and other weaponry. I'm just wondering, is this more like the agreed upon list between the U.S. and Ukraine, not just what they want? Because it seems like a wish list, but
clearly it's curated. I mean, but it very much reflects what they need, and it's a outgrowth of actual, no kidding discussions that we've had with Ukraine, being very candid about what we have and what we can make available to them and what they need. So certainly there's an element of curation here. You would think that would be the appropriate thing to do. And they have other capabilities, again, that we simply can't help them with, but other nations can, and the Secretary is personally working that. Yeah.
Are all these weapons available right now? Or do you have to wait for the manufacturers to produce them?
These are all available in our stocks right now. Yeah. Okay.
Can I have one clarification? So you've laid this all out. You continue to lay it all out as for the fight in Donbass, right? I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly. How is it not too late? This is going to take a while to get there. Both the U.S. and Ukraine have known the fight in the Donbass is coming. How will this not be too late?
We are going to move this as fast as we can, Barb. And I would remind you that it's not like the other material that we've been sending isn't also being used or has been useful in the Donbass. It has been, but in recognition of what the Russians are preparing to do, they're not doing it now. They're not fully up to readiness for this renewed push they want to put in the Donbass. We recognize that, and we're taking advantage of every day, every hour to get this stuff there as fast as we can.
What is your assessment? Because the administration has been very public. The Russians are resupplying, retrofitting, and moving everything towards the Donbass.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment on how much time you have?
I'm not going to detail that kind of stuff here at the podium. We have a good sense of Russian efforts to resupply and refit and to reinforce. As I just told Moshe, we already have seen that in some cases they are reinforcing now. Look, Barb, I get and I appreciate the seriousness of the question. We're aware of the clock, and we know time is not our friend. And that's why even before this was announced today, we had been moving at very, very fast speed. All the other security assistance that we've been providing frankly, at an unprecedented rate. And the Secretary has every expectation and has conveyed that expectation to the department that this material will move with the same sense of alacrity and speed.
Could it have gone earlier?
We are, and I would also remind, we're in constant conversations with the Ukrainians. Everything we've been sending is based on conversations with them. And I don't think it's helpful for anybody now, on the 13th of April, to be able to predict perfectly what happens next week. All we can do is do what we're doing in the moment, talking to the Ukrainians, seeing what they need, and moving things as fast as we can. I got time for one more. I think you had your hand up.
I did, yes. So you answered my question about the metrics for delivering this aid, but when these conversations are held, are there discussions about what could be deemed as something that Russia might retaliate against in terms of, is this maybe too much to send to Ukraine? I mean, what are the conversations going on in the Pentagon about a potential retaliation from Putin against us? I mean,
look, we're always... we never lose our focus on force protection or being able to defend ourselves or our allies. I mean, that's why we flew in another 20,000 American troops onto the European continent in just the last, 6-8 weeks. The risks of escalation beyond Ukraine and in a more deadly way is something we're constantly looking at and constantly talking about. As I answered to, I think it was Sylvie, I mean, escalation management is a big part of leadership here at the Pentagon, not just with respect to Ukraine, but all around the world. That's what we get paid to do. So we're certainly factoring in those concerns as we work with the Ukrainians. But the main focus is helping Ukraine defend itself and getting them the kinds of systems that they need most. Okay, Tony, another one?
Hey, this is a clarification.
You're killing me, Smalls. Go ahead.
The last line on the Claymore mines, it's got consistent with the Ottawa blank. Ottawa Senators, Ottawa Treaty, what is it?
Thank you for noting the typo. The Ottawa Mine Treaty.
And what is that in layman's language?
For signatory nations, they agree to not purchase or transfer or accumulate anti-personnel mines.
So they can't transfer these, they have to use them or destroy them.
Claymore mines, if you look at the treaty, Claymore mines are exempted from the treaty. Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody, appreciate it.